They told you the gods were myths, that Olympus was just a mountain, that Apollo was only a story. But the Greeks never spoke of myths. They spoke of memory, memories of the soul before it fell to earth. The old philosophers taught that every human carries a divine fracture, a spark exiled from the celestial order. Plato called it the descent of the soul. The soul, they said, was born among the stars, tethered to the constellations like a forgotten chord in the cosmic lyre of Apollo. When the soul leaves the heavens, it forgets. That forgetting, the fall into matter, is what we call birth. And what religion calls sin is nothing more than amnesia of our divine origin. The Greeks mapped this fall in the sky itself. The sun, the moon, and the planets were not gods of worship. They were coordinates of memory. Every orbit marked the cycle of return. Every star, a divine name, an echo of the consciousness that once governed it. In the temples of Epidaurus, they engraved these orbits into stone. 14 Corinthian columns for the moon, 7 sacred circles for the planets, a white pillar at the center, the sun, symbol of the soul's original light. Each column was a key, each god, a code. Together they formed the celestial grammar of the soul. And the philosopher, the initiated seeker, was not a believer, but a decoder. His task was not to pray to the gods, but to remember them inside himself, to realign the inner planets of the psyche with their eternal archetypes in the heavens. The ancients said, "We are divine by nature, but mortal by forgetfulness." That's why Apollo was the god of both light and memory. His rays were not sunlight. They were consciousness itself, striking through the fog of ignorance. When a soul awakens, the Greeks said, the sky responds. The constellations are not outside us. They are the architecture of our inner world. To know the stars is to remember the self. To name the gods is to speak your own origin aloud. And that is why the ancients carved the heavens into stone, not to worship what was above, but to resurrect what was within. Because every god you have ever heard of was once your own forgotten thought, shining in the night before you were born. They told you the gods had many names, but the ancients whispered something far stranger, that each name was a door. Every title, every epithet of Hera, Artemis, or Apollo wasn't a label. It was a frequency, a divine key that tuned the human soul to the vibration of the heavens. The Greeks called it polyonymia, the power of many names. Not to confuse the gods, but to awaken them. Because the divine, they said, cannot die as long as its names are spoken. Each name was an aspect of eternal memory, a different reflection of the same immortal essence. The Orphic hymns didn't just praise, they activated. Blessed goddess, many named and all ruling, they sang to Hera. Wise and all-knowing, many-named spirit, they invoked to Demeter. Each invocation was a transformation, a change in the speaker's own consciousness. To speak the god's name correctly was to become the god for a moment, to summon not something outside you, but something asleep inside you. That is why the ancients guarded the true names in mystery temples, because names were codes and codes were power. Through these names, the divine attributes of the gods could never fade. As long as one name survived, so did the god. But polyonymia went deeper. It was the language of the heavens themselves, the celestial imprint left upon the soul before its descent to earth. Every god had infinite names because every soul remembered them differently. The many names were not chaos. They were unity seen through countless mirrors. Artemis and Apollo, twins of light, were said to govern the signs of illumination. When the soul journeyed between the sun and the moon, between reason and instinct, it encountered their radiant marks, called fina semata, the visible signs. Those who could read them were no longer mortals. They could communicate with the immortal order. But when humanity fell into forgetfulness, those signs dimmed. The gods retreated from earth, not in body, but in memory. Their temples crumbled, their hymns were silenced, yet their names remained in the sky. Each constellation, each orbit, each flicker of light, a syllable of the divine language still echoing above us. And the philosopher, the true heir of the mysteries, was the one who could listen. He did not pray upward. He remembered downward, into himself. For to remember the names of the gods is to remember the origin of your own soul. So the Greeks believed that as long as we whisper the many names, the polyonymia, the heavens stay open, because the gods never truly left. They are hidden in our words, waiting for us to speak them again. In the deepest night of the soul, when reason falls silent, two lights appear, one silver, one gold. The ancients called them the twin signs of Artemis and Apollo. They are not constellations. They are the celestial signatures of purity and intellect, the two forces that guide a soul from ignorance back to its divine origin. Artemis rules the night, untouched, eternal, untamed. She is the guardian of clarity before light. Her sign is found in the Great Bear, 7 stars known as the companions of the hunt. To the Greeks, this was no mythic beast. It was a mirror, the soul in its nocturnal wandering, searching for truth without the aid of the sun. In the darkness of her domain, Artemis purifies. She dissolves fear, she strips illusion, she forces the soul to face itself without the disguises of light. Only when that silence is complete, when every false reflection is erased, can Apollo rise. For Apollo is the second light, the golden dawn of consciousness. He does not replace Artemis, he completes her. She cleanses the vessel, he fills it with meaning. Together, the twins embody the rhythm of awakening. Artemis is catharsis, the purification through stillness, through the rejection of corruption, through sacred distance. Apollo is illumination, the understanding that follows clarity, the inner, know thyself. In the temples of Epidaurus, the ancients built this doctrine into stone. The priestesses of Artemis led the rites of cleansing, a symbolic hunt through the wilderness of the mind. Then at sunrise, the followers of Apollo performed the healing, the illumination of body and soul, purity before knowledge, silence before speech, darkness before light. Plato called this the ascent from the cave, the turning of the soul from shadow to truth. But the mystics said it differently. The moon must first remember the sun. To understand Artemis was to master fear. To understand Apollo was to master persuasion. Pytho, the divine harmony that governs not by force, but by clarity. Through Artemis, the soul learns stillness. Through Apollo, it learns to move with precision. When united, these two lights form the perfect circle of consciousness, the eternal return of forgetting and remembering, of silence and reason, of the lunar and the solar within. The Greeks believed that every soul carries both twins, the huntress who purifies and the healer who enlightens. And when they rise together, the darkness of the mind becomes radiant with divine awareness. That is the mystery of the twin lights, Artemis and Apollo, the eternal dialogue between night and dawn. They said the gods lived above the sky, but the Greeks whispered something far greater, that the true temple of Apollo was the human soul itself. When the soul is born, it descends from the eternal fire, not as punishment, but as memory. Every life, every incarnation, is a movement of that same flame between the microcosm and the cosmos, between man and the divine. Apollo, the solar mind, leaves his imprint within us, a seal of light that allows the soul to absorb, reflect, and transmit divine illumination. Without this seal, the ancients said, nothing human could remember the gods. Plato described it as the power of seeing and understanding. To the senses, things appear visible, but to the intellect, to the noetic field, the ideas themselves become radiant. To see the truth, therefore, is not with the eyes, but with the light of consciousness. The philosophers called this the heliocentric mystery, the alignment between the visible sun and the inner sun of the soul. As the stars orbit a hidden center, so too does every thought orbit its divine source. That source was not outside you. It was you before you fell into time. The great stone at the center of Epidaurus, the white sun, was not merely a monument. It was a symbol of the eternal mind waiting to be reignited. The core flame of awareness buried under the ignorance of matter. The unawakened mind, they said, lives in shadow. It sees reflections of truth, but not the truth itself. Only when the inner fire of Apollo awakens does that darkness dissolve, and the soul remembers that it was never mortal. The ancients called this revelation by a single word, phos, light. But phos meant far more than brightness. It was being, knowledge, and life itself. The Greeks saw it hidden in the word anthropos, human, which they decoded as phos rising upward, the divine light reaching for its source. To live, then, was to remember that ascent, to turn the inner eye back toward the sun within. For the true meaning of humanity, the philosophers said, was not man, but light incarnate. The body may walk the earth, but the soul forever belongs to the stars. And when you learn to see, not with your eyes, but with your flame, that is when Apollo awakens again inside you.